The Toltec Path of Recapitulation, Healing Your Past to Free Your Soul. I dedicate this book to the memory of that Carlos Castaneda of the earlier years. Preface. It has been said that we all, at the moment of dying, have a second to see our entire life again, to relive the feelings involved in all the events we have passed through. It has been said that this final second is expanded so that we can recapitulate the meaningful events of our life. It has been said that because of the magic of this reliving, in that last moment, we are able to put everything in balance, recapturing the beauty hidden in the simplest events, a tender flower opening its petals to the rising sun, or the fresh smell of the soil after the rain, the warmth of a loved person sleeping by your side, or the brilliance in the eyes of our children when they discover with amazement the extraordinary components of the world. The healing power of an embrace given in a moment of grief, or the ineffable mystery of a starry night. The laughter of loved ones, or the trembling feeling of a first kiss. The silent magic of the rain, seen through the window, or the joy of contemplating the fire in the chimney. The falling leaves of a tree, alive and dancing for a minute, enraptured by the cast of the fall wind. In other words, the extraordinary magic behind the ordinary things. It is in that moment, at the edge of death, when we realize that we have been dead from a long time ago. And only then are we fully awake and we recover the exhilaration and overwhelming understanding of the miracle of being alive. And then we die. It is sad that the last recapitulation opens the eyes of our full awareness, closed until this moment. The miracle of life is revealed to us, and then we fade away. But does it have to be like that? Is there no other way? Would it be possible by any means to recover such awareness of the magic and joy of being alive and to use it, not to die, but to live, to really live? The answer is yes. We can perform on purpose the healing journey of recapitulating our lives to recover the joy and power that we had once, just by receiving the miracle of life. This book is about the process of recovering passion for life. This book deals with the techniques, procedures, and results of such a process. This book is an open door into this quest. It is about you and your life. If you feel the call, welcome to the journey. Victor Sanchez. Introduction. This work is part of my report from 20 years of research in the field of indigenous knowledge and shamanism. Recapitulation is a powerful technique developed in the field of what I call shamanic technology. Since the word shamanism has transcended its origin among indigenous peoples from Siberia and is used so much by members of modern urban societies nowadays, it is appropriate to explain briefly how I understand that word and the way I use it. From a superficial perspective, a shaman is that person who has the knowledge and power to deal with supernatural forces, most of the time in order to heal. Those supernatural forces could be spirits, gods, entities, energy, or God. During the last 20 years, shamanism has changed from being an important issue for anthropologists involved in cultural research to becoming an attractive issue for non-specialists interested in healing and spiritual growth. Initially, our interest in shamanism had to do with the fantasy of meeting a real shaman to be healed or blessed by his or her supernatural powers. As the years have passed, our focus on shamanism has changed. Now we want to be the shamans to heal others and heal the world. Books, workshops, and seminars on shamanism for that purpose are being offered extensively around the world. Many people are reading those books and attending those workshops with the fantasy of becoming a shaman, getting power, and solving the eternal need to stop being nobody and eventually become somebody. This pursuit is another example of the kind of things we are willing to do because of the lack of sense in our lives. It is interesting to notice that for the modern man, the idea of shamanism is related to the idea of power, power to heal, power to change the events of life, power to bring the rain, good fortune, and so forth. My experience among indigenous peoples from Mexico, whom I call the surviving Toltecs, has shown me a different perspective. Shamanism is related to the idea of service, rather than the idea of power. The flesh and bone shamans I have known are marked by their commitment to the service of their communities as their primary feature. What's extraordinary about them is not so much how big their power is, but how extreme their vocation to serve others is without asking for rewards. They don't charge for their work. Rather than having income as a result of their activities as shamans, they are the poorest among the poor ones. Because besides working as hard as any other in their lives as peasants, they spend a great deal of time working hard in the service of their communities. Because of their extreme generosity and nobility of spirit, I have always been reluctant to agree with the way the word shamanism is used in our modern world, where oversimplification is the rule. Nowadays, anybody who has read even a little bit about indigenous knowledge or participated in workshops on shamanism presents him or herself as a shaman in order to sell an image that can be admired by others. In my work, giving lectures and leading seminars around the world for so long, many people, workshop organizers, media interviewers, and so forth, have tried to dress me with the title of shaman. I've never accepted that, because I know real shamans and their offering of an entire life of service to reflect spirit, without a trace of self-importance in what they do. Because of that, I would never dare to put myself at the same level of those men and women of bare feet. My audiences will not be large because I don't participate in the dance of masks, pretending to be a shaman or a nawal. In my opinion, most of the time what is behind the compulsive need to wear titles is self-importance. The need to present oneself as, I am the one, to others has done much damage, for both the illuminated ones and their followers. I know those titles are convenient for marketing and profits, but for me, freedom is a more precious value. At the end, we all die as we have lived. Death is not impressed by our titles. Shamans of real life are not like the perfect indigenous masters of books. Their bodies bleed, their hearts suffer, their children get sick, their souls cry and laugh. Indigenous shamans in the real world are facing the violence of a time when their whole world is being devoured by the unbounded greed of the white man. And they are resisting. They are fighting to survive and to keep the treasure of their spiritual tradition alive, not just for them, not even just for their children, but for the entire world, you and me included. What makes them so precious for humanity is that they are making the miracle of raising themselves and their people from the existential misery and solitude in which we live to reach and become one with the most extraordinary force in the universe, the unspeakable, the Great Spirit. And the most extraordinary part is that they are making this miracle of recovering the lost unit at the same time that they are struggling with extreme poverty. They are human beings, just like you and me, dealing and fighting with the material world, just like you and me. But they are able to raise themselves from the pain and confusion of the material world, to reach the spirit and become one with God. And the big news is that what they do, we can do. They are showing us the way. But it is our responsibility to perform the miracle by ourselves in our own life. My experience with shamanism has shown me that the task of the shaman has little to do with achieving individual goals. Shamans are not doing what they do as a personal issue. They are participating, together with their community, in the task of remembering and keeping alive the means to return to the spirit and live in harmony with it. Those sets of procedures are called tradition, which is not a body of beliefs, but instead a body of practices. Now, let's change the focus from the shaman as an individual to the shamanic experience as a possibility for everyone. While the shaman is a specific person, playing a specific role in the magical time of the rituals and ceremonies, the shamanic experience is lived and shared by all the individuals involved in the event. In this sense, the shamanic experience is both individual and collective, and therefore is open to all the members of the group, as long as they follow the proper procedures. The goal of the shamanic experience is to bring back the participants to the lost unity with the unspeakable force moving everything in the universe. The separate poles, sacred and mundane, spirit and matter, the self and what's out there, all become one during the shamanic experience. Our two internal sides, tonal and nawal, are reintegrated, and we experience the unity of our double nature. The recovery of that unity is the secret promise in the Toltec symbol of the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. The serpent represents what crawls, the tonal, the material world. The eagle represents what flies, the nawal, the spirit. But unlike the Aztec symbol, in which the eagle is killing the serpent, the Toltec symbol of Quetzalcoatl shows how the eagle and the serpent have become one. The feathered serpent, the unity of spirit and matter, the equilibrium between tonal and nawal. The shamanic experience is so important for us, members of modern urban societies, not just because it could be exciting or fun to become a shaman. The shamanic experience is deadly important because our lack of appropriate means to reconnect ourselves with the spirit is causing a continual process of self-destruction for us as individuals and as a species. Because of this, my work for all these years has been to try to create a bridge between our modern societies and the shamanic experiences kept alive among indigenous peoples. I am convinced that the major disease of our time is the lack of experiences in which we may remember and live again our hidden awareness, the other self, and the sacred connection we have with everything surrounding us. We need shamanic practices that are appropriate for our time and our society. It would not be enough just to try to imitate the rituals and procedures of indigenous peoples. Shamanism and tradition are a series of practices and techniques to manipulate and heighten awareness. But the specific expression of these technologies is and should always be in accordance with the specific features of the people who are going to use them in a specific time and place. This means that while the shamanic practices of indigenous peoples should be related to the features of their way of life as peasants who live in close contact with nature, our practices should be related to the kind of world and life we have in modern societies. Our effort in AVP, the new Toltequity, has been to develop methods and procedures for the people of the modern world so that they can complete by themselves the shamanic jump to the other side of themselves and to the other side of reality. The reason for this journey through the shamanic experience is that there is no health without completion. Only by recovering and integrating the experiences corresponding to our double nature can we reach what constitutes our natural rights: power, health, and freedom. What I call shamanic technology introduces the results of our experience researching and developing the modern expressions of the shamanic experience. The Toltec path of recapitulation introduces the practice of recapitulation, which I consider to be one of the first and main steps for a serious process of healing and self-liberation. The use of the word Toltec and the indigenous roots of recapitulation. The word Toltec has been abused in so many ways that a clarifying comment is needed here. As a Mexican person and member of a tradition whose roots come from the ancient Toltec, a historical ethnic group from Mexico, I have been sensitive to the strange use of this name, such as applying it to people who have come from other planets, from Atlantis, or from other dimensions. Such theories are a misrepresentation of the historical existence of the ancient Toltecs and the current existence of indigenous peoples who keep alive the ancient traditions of the Toltecs. I understand the positive intention that many people may have in using the word Toltec to refer to a person of knowledge. But at the same time, I think it is very important to have a special respect for the historical Toltecs and the surviving Toltecs by not creating confusion around the identity of this group. Respect for a culture that has served humanity by preserving and sharing its sacred technology for heightened awareness is also demonstrated by consciously not misrepresenting those of this culture. This misrepresentation often occurs in spiritual books, in which Toltecs are characterized by the imaginations and expectations of non-indigenous spiritual seekers. Of course, the intentions of the writers of these books are positive. By writing books related to those indigenous people who are connected to the Toltec tradition, they are, on the one hand, calling attention to and promoting respect and appreciation of these people. On the other hand, however, these books may be contributing to misunderstanding these people by substituting their voice, knowledge, and world vision with one that is not their own. Because of this, it is important for me to make clear that the recapitulation techniques presented in this book are inspired by ancient Toltec practices, including some that are still followed by indigenous peoples of Mexico, such as the Wirarika. As far as I know, however, these techniques were not performed in this way by the ancient Toltecs, nor are they performed today by the surviving Toltec. There are roots of the practice of recapitulation to be found among the Toltecs of the past, as well as other ancient indigenous groups. Tlaquentlalia is a word in Nahuatl, the language of the Toltec, Aztec, and many other indigenous groups in Mexico, that was translated by Alonso de Molina, a 16th century Catholic friar, as gathering together the sins, bringing them to memory. It is obvious that the energetic healing process of recapitulation was unknown to him. He relates the same process to the concept of sin. The resulting practice was Teochihua, which De Molina translates as releasing the sins, and which we understand today as a healing catharsis. This kind of practice can be found among the Wirarika people of the present who have in their ritual the practice of telling the history of their lives, as well as whatever may be considered a sin or emotional pain to Grandfather Fire. This practice implies an energetic exchange that takes place beyond verbal communication and is followed during their sacred pilgrimages, during moments of intimacy with the fire in the Calihue, or a ceremonial center in their communities, or anywhere else where a ritual fire is ignited. These kind of indigenous practices of the past and present are the roots of the techniques developed by me and my team in nearly 20 years of research. Our techniques are a modern expression of these ancient self-healing practices. In other words, they should be understood as modern or new Toltec techniques. To make this completely clear, we can establish a simple distinction between all three kinds of Toltecs. The ancient Toltecs were a specific indigenous group from central Mexico, existing sometime between the 7th and 12th centuries, whose spiritual influence on many other indigenous peoples of the past was the greatest in the Mexican pre-Hispanic indigenous world. Despite the dark, bloody tales that the European conquerors created around the Toltecs, this group represented the height of spiritual, cultural, and technological development in ancient Mexico. The current presence in the Mexican territory of indigenous peoples who are their spiritual heirs can be proved without doubt. The surviving Toltecs refers to those indigenous peoples who have kept alive the tradition of the ancient Toltecs and whom I have been involved with, as I have described in Toltecs of the New Millennium. The new Toltecs are both indigenous and non-indigenous peoples who are working to keep the Toltec tradition alive, not only in the indigenous world, but in the non-indigenous world as well. The new Toltecs are committed to following the path of the ancient and surviving Toltecs by creating specific and appropriate procedures to fit the needs of our modern urban societies. It could be said that we are opening new paths, following the footprints of the ancient Toltecs. About the structure of this book. This is a book oriented to practice. It presents the results of long research into a process of self-healing of the energetic body that affects major changes and benefits in the practitioner's life. I have organized this book into two parts. Part 1, devoted to theory, and Part 2, devoted to practice, the latter being the larger section of the work. Since I am a man basically oriented more to action than to thoughts or words, I can understand clearly those readers who want to go directly to the exercises, skipping the theoretical part, especially those who are familiar in one way or another with the theme of recapitulation. On the one hand, I understand that kind of haste to enter into the practice. On the other hand, I cannot make here the same suggestion that I did in my book, The Teachings of Don Carlos, where I told my readers that it was okay to skip chapters and go directly to the reading and practice of those techniques that were more attractive to them. On the contrary, in this book, I highly recommend not skipping chapters, but reading them all in the order they are presented, because each step will be really understood only in the light of the following ones. The reason is that this book deals basically with a single area of work and all its component techniques. Part 1 deals with two main goals. 1. To explain what recapitulation is, why it is such a valuable practice, and what we can get from its practice. 2. To provide the general sense of understanding and commitment that should accompany the process of practicing recapitulation. Even if you are already willing to do recapitulation, you are going to need the information provided in the first part of this book. Additionally, in this part, you will hear about the evidences, testimonies, and results of many of those who have practiced recapitulation throughout the years of our research. And at the end of this part, I have included a comment of prevention about the exceptional cases when recapitulation is not recommended. Part 2 is devoted basically to the presentation and instructions for practicing recapitulation and all its sub-techniques. The AVP 10 steps technique for recapitulation is presented here and is the main content of this book. At the end of this part, you will find a complementary chapter that deals with the following: special techniques to recapitulate single events without using the recapitulation box, instead of recapitulating series of events about our entire life as we do with the main technique. The whole set of special breathing techniques used during recapitulation exercises. Additional practices to balance your life after the introduction of the changes achieved through recapitulation. Here, we will deal with field exercises in nature, saving energy, cultivating well-being, and so forth. Information about the activities and workshops that AVP groups organize around the world. Now you have an idea about the itinerary. Enjoy the trip. Part 1. The what, why, and how of recapitulation. Recapitulation. 1. Preliminaries and first approach to recapitulation. The outline. In simple words, recapitulation is a procedure of self-healing that is done by reliving the events of our past in such a way that we are able to restore our own being from the damage that many of those events left in us. This damage is usually expressed as repetitive emotional conflicts, the persistence of the routines of our personality that drain our vital energy comes from this energetic damage as well. Recapitulation is the medicine for that disease. In terms of energy, it could be said that recapitulation is the series of energetic procedures that restore our field of energy from the damage received in the past. The consequence of recapitulation is recovery of the state of completeness that we had at the moment of our birth. In practical terms, it implies recovering the freedom of choosing how to be and how to live, instead of endlessly repeating the exhausting internal routines established in our past. I have written about recapitulation and described the basic technique in my book, The Teachings of Don Carlos. Nevertheless, 10 years have passed from the time when the first draft of the book was written. During those 10 years, a great deal has happened regarding our research in recapitulation. From the first design of the technique described in my first book to the current techniques, much has changed, and the procedure now has a much more refined design. The experience of those 10 years, working with recapitulation, meeting with successes, and sometimes making mistakes to learn from them, has taken us to the moment of presenting to the world what we call new discoveries in recapitulation and the AVP 10 steps technique for recapitulation. All this experience, these changes, the amazing positive results we have found through working with recapitulation, and the perception that recapitulation is one of the most efficient and transformational processes a human being can undertake, have been my motivation to write this book. The roots of recapitulation. The roots of recapitulation are lost in time. Legends and living practices among indigenous peoples, descendants of the ancient Toltecs, speak about the enormity of the knowledge developed by the ancient inhabitants of Tula and other Toltec populations. Different recapitulation-like experiences are still practiced among their descendants. The indigenous practice of telling one's life story to Grandfather Fire is a simple but deep way of recapitulation. It is also an example of how the awareness of the importance of our past experiences as an influence in our current life has been present in the human consciousness from a long time ago. In psychology and psychoanalysis, the observation of the past is seen as an important way to understand what the person in the present is. In spite of the enormous differences between psychoanalysis and recapitulation, it is possible to see how the awareness of that past is destiny and is a constant in most people of the world. In Webster's New World College Dictionary, the word recapitulate is defined as to repeat briefly, as in an outline. Listed as a synonym is repeat, which is a simple and clear approach to what the techniques of recapitulation are about. Repeating in the sense of reliving, and summarizing in terms of doing it in shorter time, looking for the basic structure, are actually part of the procedures that are the core of this book. Developing recapitulation techniques. The work about the past, and even the idea of reliving the past as a step in a healing process, is present in many different therapeutic practices, from bioenergetics to hypnosis, from body therapy to orthodox psychoanalysis, and from primal therapy to the spiritual practices of different indigenous peoples. Nevertheless, the term recapitulation, associated with a systematic practice to heal ourselves from the damages obtained in the past, was introduced for the first time by Carlos Castaneda in his book, The Eagle's Gift, in 1982. In that book, Castaneda describes a very general procedure for recapitulation. Even though the theme is enticing, his description of the technique is too general, and what's more relevant for the readers interested in the practice is that his description does not provide the necessary background to apply those practices in the context of everyday life. The idea of restoring the energetic body was very appealing to Castaneda's readers. But though the recapitulation practices described in his books were quite attractive, they were difficult to apply because of the enormous distance between the strange world described by the apprentice of the sorcerer and the life of Castaneda's readers. As I have explained in my book, The Teachings of Don Carlos, my relationship with the books of Castaneda was a little bit different from that of most of his readers, due to my connection with indigenous peoples who are inheritors of the ancient Toltec tradition. My participation and membership in the Toltec tradition gave me a much more practical understanding of those books. Having been trained in the mnemomashtic system, which is the rule in Toltec knowledge, it was natural for me to bring into action every interesting practice mentioned in Castaneda's books and to learn by myself. This way, practicing by myself and then with the groups for personal growth that I have coordinated for 20 years, I developed the modern techniques that are the main content of this book. In its current way, these practices incorporate procedures from the following: procedures and adaptations of procedures that we learned among the Wirarika people, whom I call the surviving Toltecs, which are related to the process of recapitulation, resulting in an empowering of the whole process. Techniques that we have developed inspired in part by Castaneda's earlier books. Practices and modifications created by me and my teammates in response to the needs that appeared during the continual practice of recapitulation. A few people have criticized our techniques, suggesting they are not the same as those that Castaneda presented in his books. It is true that our techniques are not the same as the ones presented by Castaneda, and I am happy about that. Our goal has never been to imitate or blindly follow Castaneda's writings, but rather to develop practical and efficient procedures in order to help people succeed in their own quest for healing, growth, and freedom. This work is more down to earth because it is oriented to the people who live in this world and not in the so-called sorcerer's world. The proposals presented in this work are the result of 13 years of research, designing procedures, creating exercises, making mistakes, and learning from them, and applying and testing the results with more than 2,000 practitioners. This research has been public, open to anyone interested in participating. We have had the participation of psychiatrists, psychologists, and psychoanalysts who have found our procedures highly effective as powerful tools for personal growth and transformation. Many of them are including parts of our procedures in their professional practices with their own patients. For the first time, ways to connect the shamanic experience with the field of psychology and other sciences for health are being opened, and AVP is contributing to this process. AVP, El Arte de Vivir a Propósito. The Art of Living Purposefully, AVP for its initials in Spanish, is an organization that for 20 years has been working to bring to modern society the hidden treasures of indigenous knowledge. Due to its deep connection with the descendants of the historic Toltecs, AVP has adopted a second name, the new Toltequity. With this name, we are assuming our role in the tremendous task of rescuing and translating the Toltec knowledge so it can be understood and used by non-Indigenous people. As I have explained in Toltecs of the New Millennium, it is my vision and belief that in the Indigenous world, and in the surviving Toltecs world in particular, there are responses to the most urgent problems in our modern societies. Finally, the ultimate reason to open this work to the world is that we have lived in our own lives and seen in many other people's lives the positive results obtained by practicing recapitulation. This is not a story that was born in somebody's imagination. It is not something that I have heard or read, or that has been told by someone else. We have done it, and the results are power, beauty, and freedom. Are you ready to join us? 2. What is recapitulation? Definition. Providing a definition of recapitulation is not difficult at all. The point here is that we are dealing with something that is beyond the boundaries of the rational mind. Definitions cannot contain something so changing as the process of recapitulation. That is why many definitions for recapitulation will be provided throughout this work. Each of them will help you reach a deeper understanding of the process. Let's start. Basically, recapitulation is what our energetic body does in order to heal itself from the damage incurred in the past as a consequence of negative energetic interaction. To understand this, it is necessary to open our vision to the meaning of our existence as fields of energy. A completely different vision of ourselves from the one we have in the everyday world. According to Toltec knowledge, trying to understand our existence from the point of view of our ego and the rational mind results in a mostly confusing exercise where conflict between thought A and thought B is irresoluble. The Toltec knowledge offers a much deeper and practical approach to our true nature. We are the children of the sun, which in terms of energy means we are fields of energy. According to this vision, everything that happens to all the beings in the universe is related to their level of energy and to the kind of energetic interactions they have with the beings surrounding them. Humans are not the exception. The energetic body. When we talk about the energetic body, we are talking about something that is different from the ego. It is different from that perception of ourselves as something that is located inside our head. It is even different from the physical body itself. The energetic body is bigger than our physical body, which means that it includes parts that we normally do not see, such as the energy surrounding the physical body, which is known as the aura, feelings, and the dreaming body. Ultimately, the energetic body is the one that feels, the one that connects itself with what is out there. It is the counterpart to the ego, which is basically connected to itself. The energetic body is the biggest of mysteries. It is not possible to determine where it starts and where it ends. We may live part of its endless possibilities, but we cannot deplete them. It is because of our energetic body that we are simply another mystery in the middle of all the mysteries surrounding us. We have no bottom. To understand recapitulation, it is necessary to talk about the energetic body. Recapitulation is done by the energetic body, which includes our physical body, but is more than just that. The ultimate nature of all human interactions is that they are exchanges of energy, positive exchanges, negative exchanges, neutral exchanges, but exchanges in one way or another. These exchanges lead to consequences. At the present, we are basically the result of those exchanges. Energetic exchanges were printed in our energetic body, and we live the way we live. We see the world we see, and we are what we are because of those exchanges and their energetic prints. I know that at this point, this explanation is too abstract, mainly because we do not see how the energy is being moved and affected by our actions and interactions. Nevertheless, as we advance in our presentation, the abstract will become concrete, and you will understand how those energetic exchanges and their result have been and continue to be experienced in your everyday life. From now on, every time I mention the body, please remember that I am talking about the energetic body and not the physical body. When I am talking about the physical body, I will specify this by calling it the physical body. Now, with this in mind, we can go ahead with our definition of recapitulation. Recapitulation is the natural process of energetic restoration of our energetic body from the damages that come from the past. This natural act is done by our body. It consists of bodily remembering and reliving the meaningful events of our lives in order to perform a healing process to recover the state of energetic completeness and balance that we had when we were born. Let us look by part at the contents of our definition. Natural self-healing process. Recapitulation is a natural process of energetic restoration of our energetic body. This means that the energetic body heals itself. I can imagine many people's expressions of surprise at this. What are you talking about? A natural self-healing process that my body knows? I'm just hearing about this stuff, recapitulation, for the first time. And you're telling me that I already know how to do it? What are you talking about? I know it sounds strange, but the fact is, yes, we already know how to recapitulate and accomplish that process of energetic self-healing. To be more precise, I should say that it is our energetic body that knows how to recapitulate, which is different from saying that our personal ego or rational mind knows how to recapitulate. The problem is that we are focused on our own ego most of the time, remaining far from our energetic body. In this way, we block many of our natural self-healing processes, such as recapitulation. Ego versus energetic body. By always staying in the ego, we do not even know that there is more to what we are. Actually, we are not that ego. We are a field of energy, while the ego is an illusion, or more exactly, a spell. The energetic body is much more real. Actually, it is what happens to our energetic body that determines our destiny, and not all those explanations that our ego provides about itself through our talking mind. To be focused always on our ego and thinking we are that ego is not something concomitant to human existence. We have been trained by our culture to believe that all behaviors, routines, and repetitive reactive ways of thinking about everything, including ourselves, is what we are. We think we are everything that is implied by the words I, me, and self. The ego is no more than a very detailed description of what we think we are, according to our personal history. It seems so real and so definitive because we have learned during our entire life to live as if the ego were the most real thing in this world. We are always acting in accordance with our ego, and by doing so, we are reinforcing the perception that our ego is real. By reinforcing the conviction that we are just that, the ego, we reinforce acting in accordance with the ego. And on it goes, endlessly. This is how we become trapped in a vicious circle that is not easy to break. The not doings, or actions liberated by the process of recapitulation, are meant to break that vicious circle. Practicing the not doings of the personal self can drastically prove the unreality of the ego. When we stop acting in accordance with our personal history and the dictations of the ego scrambles, and we can see that we are not that ego. We can see for the first time how it is to be free. These comments on the ego are relevant to emphasize the fact that focusing on the ego and believing that our self determines what we are is not the only way we can live. Humanity has not lived in that jail for all time. It has been the curse of Western society since the Greeks, when reason was placed on the throne as the best tool for human progress and knowledge. Peoples of ancient times and indigenous peoples of the present have chosen different ways, and that is why we have so much to learn from them. They have not separated themselves from the silent knowledge, the knowledge of the energetic body, as we have done. Our dual nature. By denying everything that is outside the boundaries of the rational mind, modern humans have denied half of themselves. The indigenous Toltec people of Mexico did not make that mistake. They knew that we are double beings. They knew about the double nature of the world. That is why they call the world Omeocan, or the place of duality. That is why they give a name for each side of the world, and for each side of the duality we are. They named our rational side Tonal, and our mysterious side Nawal, the side of silent knowledge. I am not talking about those invented Toltecs supposedly emerging from Atlantis or from another galaxy. I am talking about our great-grandparents, the ones who inhabited Tula in central Mexico, the ones who left us their architecture, their poetry, and their tradition to remember the path to our true nature. Those ancient Toltecs were aware of our dual nature and envisioned the integration of the two sides of our being as the goal of human existence. Unlike the Aztecs, whose military vision of the world is represented in the shield of the Mexican flag, featuring an eagle devouring a serpent, the Toltecs envisioned the two sides of the duality as the promise of integration represented in the flight of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. In the Toltec vision, the eagle does not kill the serpent. The two creatures become one in the rebirth of a new being, the plumed serpent. That was the dream of the ancient Toltecs, and that is the dream of the new Toltecs. With the awareness of our dual nature, we can understand better what has happened to us as members of the modern Western culture. We have lost contact and even the awareness of our magical side. In forgetting this, we have lost the source of our power. Without knowing, we have abandoned the experience of self-healing that was our natural inheritance in the times when humanity did not run away from the silent knowledge. The result is more and more disease. The more we create medicines for the benefit of the pharmaceutical industry, the more new diseases appear. Our natural mechanisms of self-healing are debilitated. The natural capacity to recapitulate and heal ourselves from the damaging experiences of the past is one of those precious treasures we have lost. That is the bad news. The good news is that we can recover on purpose that capacity, which implies that not everything is lost. Now, what we said before is understandable. Our energetic body already knows how to do recapitulation, while our rational mind does not know. Because our energetic body is able to perform the self-healing process, the way to fully heal ourselves lies in finding out how to go back to the awareness of the energetic body. And that is exactly what we do with the exercises for recapitulation. Now that we understand that recapitulation is a natural process of self-healing, let us focus on the next part of our definition. It consists of bodily remembering and reliving the meaningful events of our lives in order to perform a healing process to recover the state of energetic completeness and balance that we had when we were born. Ordinary memory and body memory. The process of recapitulation involves the remembering of past events. But this remembering is not like the normal mental recalling we continuously engage in during everyday life. While normal memory is basically thinking, body memory is closer to feeling. It is a process of reliving, which in one way is like going back to restore what was wrong. This does not mean that we can change the past. What we can change are the consequences that result from the past and the way these consequences are affecting our present life. Actually, normal memory and recapitulation are so different that they each give us a completely different report of what our life has been. This is one of the reasons to call the memories that we get through recapitulation the memories of the other self, or the not doing of memory. Normal memory is a speech we have been telling ourselves throughout our whole life. It is the interpretation and the explanation we have been giving ourselves and others about what has happened in our life, without being aware. Those explanations have been changing all the time to suit the need or affirmation of our ego. That is the function of our normal memory, to support and justify what we are in terms of ego. While normal memories sustain the ego, recapitulation memories reveal the energetic body. In fact, what I have seen again and again in our recapitulation workshops is people discovering that what they thought was their past was not real at all. What they used to call my past was no more than their own myth of origin. Our myth of origin. The myth of origin of the ego, that thing which we call me or I, is the story we have unconsciously created to justify the way we are. That is why we are so attached to what we call our past. Even if it was terrible, we secretly love our past and are very resistant to leaving it behind because it is what sustains our ego. When we finally face our real past, it can lead to surprising discoveries. Perhaps you learn you are not the victim, but the victimizer. Or maybe, after a life pretending you have always cared about somebody or something, you discover while recapitulating that you have not cared at all about that person or situation. The opposite is also common. Perhaps you spent your life pretending you did not love or care for your father, only to discover at the moment of his death, or through recapitulation, that you have always deeply loved him. One of the clearest examples I have seen of this is that of a man who has become one of my best friends. This is a true story, but I will change my friend's name to preserve his privacy. Years ago, Juan Carlos started as a participant in my workshops. He was very shy and silent. When he tried to talk to others, he stammered. Eventually, he reached a moment when he was feeling more confident with his group companions and confessed what was hurting him. I am 30 years old and I have never kissed a woman, he said. I don't know how it feels. I am a 30-year-old man and I have never had a girlfriend. That's what hurts me. I don't want to be alone, but I don't know how to approach other people, especially women. I would like to be as any other man, he continued. But that's my pain. I don't know how. Everybody in the room was shocked. Juan Carlos was so normal. He was a slim young man, not a monster or anything like that. He had a profession and a good income. Then why was he sunk in that deep hole? But how is this possible? What happened to you? The group asked. Then he told the story of his life. He had been a sad child because his father never wanted to play with him. To make matters worse, the other kids in his neighborhood rejected him because they thought he was strange, so he wasn't able to play with them either. What could be sadder than a child who does not play? I think that's why I grew up as a lonely, sad man, Juan Carlos said. If my own father didn't want to play with me, what can I expect from other people? No one in the room said a word. Everybody could feel what he felt. He was right. After we had listened to his terrible experiences, his current situation was understandable. Juan Carlos continued with his work until the time when he started Recapitulation. He was participating with 56 other women and men in our yearly 15-night intensive workshop of Recapitulation. In that experience, the participants spent each night for 2 weeks inside a box for recapitulation. At the end of the first week, the night was especially intense. Movement and noise could be heard coming from the boxes. Sounds of voices, screams, laughter, and singing were all mixed together. Participants were reliving intensely. Then from Juan Carlos's box, we could hear a very loud shouting. We did not know what was going on, but we could feel that whatever it was very intense. Later on, around 3 a.m., Juan Carlos came out of his box. He was screaming and laughing all at once. It was very strange. I felt a bit worried about his state. Then I could see that he was crying from happiness. It was a lie, Juan Carlos was crying. It was a lie. What was a lie, Juan Carlos? What are you talking about? I asked. My life. It was a lie. He kept repeating. It wasn't true. It wasn't true that my father never played with me. While saying this, Juan Carlos kept laughing and crying at the same time, in a state of uncontrolled internal turmoil. I could remember playing with my father. He was in fact a worried and strict man, but he had made many good gestures of companionship. We played together. I could remember laughing. It wasn't true that I never played with other children. Memories came to me of the fun I had with other kids. It was a lie. Why had I lost my joy? It wasn't true. I am a normal man. How could I forget all that? How could I? Were the amazed questions of our friend. Juan Carlos was happy to the point of tears for having recovered his joy and the love of his father. The story of the sad boy who then became a sad man was a lie that his ego used to avoid the risk of change. Though it was a very happy night for Juan Carlos and for all of us having the luck of sharing his time to awaken, the story did not end there. Less than a month after the workshop, Juan Carlos solved his problem of not having kissed a woman. Certainly, he did a lot more than that. Within a few months, he became a popular man among females. It got to the point where we had to warn him, "Slow down, man. You're not supposed to have everything you like." The story of Juan Carlos is just an example of how we are tied to a past that most of the time is just a fiction that we have built to justify our fear of change and negligence of attempts at changing. But his history is also an example of how powerful and healing the task of recapitulation is to our lives. As we have seen, our ordinary memory does not give us a real report of what our life has been. That is the story of the ego. The real story of what we are is the story of our energetic body. When your energetic body tells its story, what you see is very different from the ego's version. It is not based on the ego's interpretation of what was pleasant or unpleasant, but is founded on what we and others have done to our energetic body and the subsequent benefits or wounds we have received. This story, despite the fact that it determines our entire life, is often forgotten, erased from normal memory, and it requires some work to recover it. The important part is that through the act of remembering, our energetic body is able to take our awareness back to the event so that we have a second chance to face the situation in a different manner. This process will be explained in detail later in this book. Because recapitulation is a natural act, once we take our body to a specific situation and event, it should take control and do the recapitulation by itself. Unfortunately, that is not usually what happens. Let us see why. In our everyday life, our body is not performing recapitulation by itself so we can heal and restore our energetic body in a natural way. This is because we are blocking the natural self-healing process by our persistence in protecting the ego and its demands. Black holes in the energetic body. If we get a scratch on our skin and our finger bleeds, the physical body will immediately react to generate a procedure of self-healing that allows the wound to close soon. Even with major injuries, our body always does its best to heal itself. But what would happen if we continually contaminate the wound again and again? The wound would not close and would become a major problem to our system. Yet that is exactly what we do to the damages inflicted on our energetic body. Because of our devotion to the defense of the ego at all times, our energy-wasting routines block the natural process of self-healing, making the damages or holes in our field of energy permanent. This is why we should undertake the challenge of recapitulating on purpose through a complex and sophisticated series of techniques. There is a very good example of how our energetic body is able to self-heal as long as we do not hinder the natural process: having children. When we have children, we are giving a large amount of our own energy for the new being that is coming into the world. We actually achieve an energetic whole because of that. Warriors do have babies. The issue of warriors having children has confused some of Castaneda's readers. The confusion has to do with parts of the second ring of power and the eagle's gift, where he introduces this idea of warriors choosing not to have babies in order to keep their energetic bodies intact. This gives us the impression that warriors do not have children, or that if we have children, we are lost, and the warrior's way will never be for us. We could even go to the extreme. If everybody follows these ideas, this way of thinking would ultimately mean the end of humanity. This is similar to the idea expressed in Castaneda's associate, Taisha Abular's book, The Sorcerer's Crossing, where we find the statement that every time women have sexual intercourse, they are condemned for 7 years to give their energy to the man they have had sex with, through the worm-like energy lines that the man leaves in the woman's womb. Ergo, having sex is always wrong for women. Celibacy is their only gate of escape. If you are a woman who has sex, you are lost. Wait a minute. Are we talking about the teachings of shamanism or the church-like morality of the Middle Ages? These kinds of ideas could be very confusing. But this is the moment to remember that books are just books. And a better way to use them is to read them without abandoning the use of our own discernment. This means that no matter how much we love or like an author's work, it will always be okay to disagree with some parts of what we read. I know this sounds obvious, but the truth is that many readers do not dare to disagree with an author whose work they love, because they feel that doing so would be akin to betraying their beloved author. I do not think this is betrayal. On the contrary, my view is that serious authors are looking not for fanatics, but for responsible readers who are going to read with attention what we write, then apply their own criteria to accept and choose what is useful for them and discard what is not. Looking for non-critical acceptance of everything we write would be the equivalent of building a cult to control and taking advantage of the followers' blind belief in us. To illustrate this point, I have found some deeply touching passages in Castaneda's books, such as the one in which Don Genaro embraces the earth in a rapture of passionate love for the being that gives us home, nourishment, and destiny. I felt touched to tears when I read this passage. While those emotions of joy and deep understanding are in my heart, they do not prevent me from saying that I consider aberrant the idea that having sex and having children is always wrong. I am myself a father, and I am very happy about that.